really mindful that we have a lot of amazing content to fit into 1 hour, and some really great breakout sessions that I want to get folks into. So we will get started. We are recording this first portion of the session, so this will be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. But let me just start by saying welcome. And my name is Lucy Abbott. I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for the Greater Northampton Chamber of Commerce. It's also my pleasure to run marketing campaigns for the Hampshire County Regional Tourism Council. We are in the last day, or last event, not the last day. We really run our Connect campaign until the end of the year, but we're in the last of our Connect campaign events. This fall we've hosted an Arrive at 5, virtual of course. We hosted a program called Chamber 101 that you can watch on our YouTube channel that really gives you a nice overview of what we do here at the Chamber, and how you can get involved. And then just last week or the week before, we had another Link and Learn session on planning in all kinds of different ways for during this uncertain time as a business owner or a leader of an organization. And so today we'll really dive into social media as a focus. It's really fun for me to get together with all these social media experts that we have brought together for you today. Lexi is making a face, but there are experts of all different kind of areas of social media here today. And so we'll really get a great quick masterclass from each of these guys in their little areas of expertise. So big areas of expertise. So let me just kind of quickly let you know about the format for the hour. So we will dive in this first portion to hearing from each of our panelists, their kind of top tips and tricks. So you'll leave this first portion with some really concrete things to think about and think about implementing into your social media plans. And then we'll jump right into breakout sessions that will go for the remainder of the hour. Each session, you'll travel around with the same group. So introduce yourself in that first session, and then you can visit each of our panelists to dive a bit deeper into their topic. So I'm going to get started really quickly with introducing our panelists today. I'm going to share my screen quickly here. So social media strategies for turbulent times. We know that this is a time when things are changing. Social media can be a fantastic tool for communicating with your audiences during really any time, but especially now, though the landscape of social media is certainly saturated. So we're going to get into some strategies for how to navigate that. So I will be your host. I'm Lucy Abbott. Again, I already introduced myself. Yes, my shirt does say Western Massachusetts. I am not from the area, but very proud to call it home and do work for the Chamber here. So our first panelist, Christopher Schaffoot, Measured Marketing Lab. Christopher is really going to get into the analytical side of things today. Measured Marketing Lab gives you confidence by managing the technology and analytics backbone you'll need when executing, measuring, and improving campaigns over time. So he's going to get into testing content, tracking campaigns, and we'll hear from him shortly in our first round of tips and tricks. Next, we have Jamie Coco of Empowered Social Media. Jamie's been marketing ever since he was a kid. I love that, creating homemade scratch tickets to sell his family. He's one of the most creative people I've kind of come into contact in the social media area. He's a holistic marketing expert with passions for social media, coaching, and creating community. And in his breakout today, we'll be talking about the golden rule of creating engaging content. So Jamie will dive into that a little bit later. Next, we have Alana Sharnoff, who joins us from B Strategic Communications. She is the principal. She provides customized communications and web strategy that maximizes visibility, motivates engagement, delivers impactful messaging through digital marketing and media campaigns, website architecture, SEO, and user experience, messaging, branding, and content development. So kind of the whole thing, but today Elena will be focusing on using your words, so storytelling, messaging, and authenticity, and sort of the value of authenticity in the world of social media. And next we have Lexi Walters-Wright, who is from Florence, and High Five Books that she opened, an independent bookshop for young people of all ages, opened just last year in downtown Florence. Previously, she was a writer, editor, and community manager for over 15 years. And today, she's going to be talking about you know, you're not a designer, that's okay. How to make social media look good with Canva, one of my favorite tools, and one that's really great to get into if you're not familiar with it. And last but certainly not least, Blair Winans of Rhyme Digital, who's he's got over 20 years of experience in marketing, design, and digital services. And he and his team at Rhyme handle all aspects of digital marketing for clients in a wide variety of industries and experience levels. Have the pleasure of working with him on some campaigns myself, and he's going to be speaking about snackable content strategy. So ways to think about working with your content to make it easier on yourself in getting things out there. So without further ado, I'll stop my screen share for a moment and we'll get into our first session where I'd like to invite Christopher to start by giving his top tips and tricks for social media marketing during this time.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lucy. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. When I was asked to think about the turbulent times part, it reminded me of pretty much every other aspect in life of, as Judge Judy put it to a bunch of 8th graders at a graduation I went to, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So when the turbulent times come and you're already ready, you can react more quickly. So most of the stuff I do is for boring old quarterly and annual and monthly reporting and year-over-year trends and things. But it came in really handy during the pandemic to refer to the data systems that we had engineered for clients to make decisions. Do we retrench? Do we pull back? Do we push harder? What do we do? So the things that I'm going to talk about, I would do anyway, turbulent times or normal times. But in the context of social media, what I wanted to illustrate is 3 relatively straightforward things, but I want to start with the context that everything in marketing is an experiment. And if you log the results of your experiments, then you can track at the end whether the experiment was a success. And you can compare it to other experiments you've run going after the same objectives. So if logging everything and focusing on and figuring out what's working gradually increases your odds of success, then it follows that you would want to build a comprehensive feedback loop for your marketing. So you can track all of your experiments, whether they be social, paid media, search engine optimization, et cetera, et cetera. So the 3 tips that I have to do with your analytics in general, your blogging in particular, or posting in particular, and then third, a blind spot for most of us in our analysis of where customers come from and which marketing campaigns are working. So first, there's some news, and I don't know, I think in the breakout we're going to share screens, so I'll share screens later, but most of us know that if you have a website, you should have Google Analytics. What they don't tell you is Google Analytics doesn't set itself up. And then secondly, Google keeps changing the iteration of Google Analytics. So if your website, for example, is current, you would be on Google Analytics Universal. Prior to that, there was a different name for it, and there's some backward compatibility, but at some point, Google's going to stop supporting older versions. And the recommendation we're making to clients is make sure your Google Analytics universal system is set up accurately before January 1st, so you get a good year of data collection. In parallel, get a Google Analytics 4 property, which is their new version. And Google readily admits they don't have all the bugs worked out and they're not finished, but they're sort of in beta, and they're recommending that webmasters start accumulating data in parallel to get a feel for what the newer version of Google will do for you. And then I bring this up in the context that this is all part of your tag management. It's another configuration required to collect data, and you may end up using Google Tag Manager, which would have a different way of deploying things. But tighten up your analytics today, you'll have data a year from now. The second tip is posting as if they're individual experiments. So how would you tag it? Well, there's a really cool Google tool called a campaign URL builder that lets you put in mywebsite.com/my article, and then add some other things to it that can end up showing up in Google Analytics source and medium reports. And it could tell you cool things like which campaign brought in the traffic in which channel. So that's something that you would want to also get ready, get that discipline going here at the end of the year so that next year you're collecting good data. And then finally, the blind spot tends to be if customers convert by telephone. So at that point, they jumped off the website and you lost all tracking, but you don't have to. You can implement a call tracking module that works with your analytics and sets up dummy phone numbers and then forwards them to your real phone number. But by going through that dummy number once, we can collect a whole bunch of information about which campaign they came from, what search query they might have used, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my 3 tips in 2 minutes. Tighten up your analytics, being aware that Google Analytics 4 is coming down the pike. Treat all of your posts as an individual test and tag them with a campaign URL builder from Google. And then consider tracking your phone calls if the telephone is an important channel of communication for you. I do have one pro tip. How am I doing on my 2 minutes?
Let's move on to our next person and be sure to share it in your breakout sessions. So let's move on to Jamie, and we'll just have you do your tips as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Lucy. So my first tip goes on to consistency. So during the pandemic, there's been different types of marketers. There's the marketer who's like, I'm going to keep moving forward with everything. Then you get the marketer who's a little bit shy about it and then does a little bit, but doesn't really get into it. And then you have the marketer who's scared. Like, what do I do right now? How do I target? How do I reach people with content? Either way, at some point, there's going to be some research that you do. And you might even type into Google and say, how many times should I post per week in there? A lot of the times it's going to spit back a number. You're like, oh my God, that is unrealistic for me. I can't post 1 time per day or 2 times per day or 3 times per day. I can't do that. So what I'm saying is quality over quantity is going to be really important for you. So if you get to a point where you're like, all right, realistically, I have 2 hours a week to put into my social media, that might equal that you have to post 2 times per week. And that's okay. You're not going to hit that, once per day, the 2 times per day, but that's not what's most important. It's about you being consistent with your content. The second tip I'm going to have for you is mobile first. So most people are looking at the content mobile on a mobile device. So what that means is when you're generating content, I'll put my phone up here, as we're generating, you're going to do that portrait style. So that phone up and down, that's the kind of content that you want to generate. So if you're taking images, you want to create it like that. And the reason you do is because it takes up the most screen space. So if you think about, in comparison, this landscape image here, where it's really easy for someone to scroll past it and not even realize or recognize the image itself. But when you have that longer form content that you're putting up there, that image, it takes them a while to scroll past it. They see more of it. They have a bigger opportunity to interact with it. And then my third tip is to be human. So What you don't want to do in social media as a business is look like a business, because people are going to scroll past you pretty quickly. So you have to have some of that human element. Talk about your team, talk about community, talk about the business itself and why you established it. Those are really important things. And sometimes we make mistakes in social media content, and that's okay. I've actually seen mistakes generate more engagement out of it and kind of make a joke off of the mistake in the future. So be human, don't try to be perfect, be you, and be authentic. Those are my tips.
Thank you, Jamie. That's awesome. Next, we'll go to Elena. Oh, you're still on mute. Just want to make sure we can hear you.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for being here. So my tips are really a lot about thinking about engaging with your audience. So social media is all about that social part. And so you're really trying to build a relationship. You really want to think about what you want to convey, what your organization wants to convey, and then to make sure that that kind of understanding underlays everything that you say, right? So because you really do want to be authentic, as Jamie says, you really want to be connecting with people who are out there who probably might even want to engage back. So I think another thing that's very useful is to include a call to action, like a little button, like learn more, or for example, just something so that they click, so that they have a reason to engage a little bit more. And another thing that you want to do is respond to the comments that you get right away, because again, it's about building a relationship, and it's about engaging with your audience. And you want to be thinking a little bit that social media is like a dinner party where you're even hosting a conversation rather than just putting something out there into the void. And the other thing that's just really useful to think about is, if it's fine to use one platform, but if you're using multiple platforms, you want to make sure that you're not repeating everything over the multiple platforms. You want to kind of tailor your messages to the kind of platform that you're using. That's going to make it most effective. And if you don't have time, then try and use one platform effectively. So I think ultimately you want to be thinking, just as your organization usually is an expression of you and in how you merchandise your store, or how you work with your clients. You want to be thinking that your social media is going to try and embody the personality that you bring to your organization. And that social media really is, it's a conversation. So think about the best way to keep on engaging that conversation.
Thank you. Great tips. Just want to do a little shout out. Is anyone having issues with Zoom? Okay. Dawn, I'm sorry, maybe it's your connection today. So I'll go next to Lexi. Let's have you share your tips.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Lexi Walters-Wright. I own High Five Books. We're a pretty new bookstore here in Florence. And I will share just one slide. I'm a bit of a visual learner myself. So I'm going to repeat something that a lot of other folks here have said today. Social media is a conversation. So I think my biggest tip is to speak and really appear on social media the way that you would talk to a shopper, a client, a prospective customer in person. And none of us have seen people in a long time, so we may be out of practice. But I think that similar to what Jamie and Elena had shared, be ready and be eager to communicate back with your followers, no matter which platform you're on. My second tip would be, how your social media looks is just as, sometimes more important than what you're actually saying. I find myself for High Five designing and then redesigning and then sometimes redesigning again a social media promo, just so that I would, as a shopper or as a parent or as a consumer, stop when I was scrolling when I got to my particular post. And so be willing to redo things and kind of tweak templates that you're currently using so that you get it exactly where you feel like you are your most authentic brand. And then I would say, and we'll talk a lot about this in our breakout session, but spend a good amount of time, at least the amount of time that you spend creating your logo and your brand's visual identity. Spend some time baking that into whatever tools it is that you're using to create your social media promos. I use Canva, and I'll be talking a little bit about that tool in our breakout sessions, but it's a set it and forget it kind of tool. So once you upload your brand's colors and your fonts and your logos, you're really just pulling from those folders over and over, and it can extremely it adds a lot of ease to your scheduling and from posting on the fly. Quickies. Thanks, Lucy.
Awesome tips. Thank you, Lexi. That was great. Let's finish off with Blair from Rhyme.
Hey, everybody. Basically, like everybody's kind of mentioned, like especially in turbulent times, it's social media is really difficult just to kind of focus on and put the energy into, and you want to find ways to just make it as easy on yourself as possible. And one of the concepts that I've just kind of like to drill into people, and it just has been drilled into me, is just like think about how people consume content. You might be great at creating long form blog posts that have great points, and you're breaking down a lot of great information there for your audience, but it's essentially you're cooking up a 12-course meal when your audience just wants a snack. And so the concept is just really about thinking about how to create snackable content. And because that's just how people consume media these days. That's really just, you have to think that they're not, basically scrolling through their feed. They might see something that catches their eye. They want a little taste of it. And that applies for social media, email marketing, and things like that. Like Lexi mentioned, there's plenty of tools to help you break down larger concepts into, smaller pieces, whether it's a graphic, a video, a GIF. Canva is a fantastic tool. There's also Crello, Animoto, Typorama, different types of things. So there's all these little tools that can help you break down those concepts into, these tinier pieces. The second tip is sometimes it's just, getting a formula for how to do that. And, so creating a template for things, for an example, just like say you have a lot of great case studies, but you just don't really know how to take that from your clients and turn that into the things that actually, people can relate to. But if you have a template that's just like, oh, well, here was the problem, here was the potential options that we had to weigh, here's a solution, and here's the lessons we learned, and you have a consistent template that you're able to kind of take that and create those snackable bits out of the content with, it helps to just make the process easier for you when you have a little bit of guidance and a little somewhat of a formula to work with. But like everybody's saying, you got to make sure that, remember that it still needs to be authentic and real and not sterile. Basically, my last tip is also don't be afraid to recycle old content into new formats. That's really something that I think we're like, oh, well, I posted that didn't work. But it doesn't mean that it won't work. You posted it as an infographic. A great example at an agency I worked with, several years ago, was taking an infographic that got a little bit of likes on social media and turning into a SlideShare presentation that ended up getting 2.3 million views. It just didn't work in one format, happened to work in another. And that's what Christopher was talking about. It took a little bit of measurement to say, like, well, maybe there's something here, looking at the analytics, let's try something else out. And so there's nothing wrong with, if it didn't necessarily work in one format, like use some of these tools that are available to try it in others.
Awesome. Thank you for that warm up, everyone. This is so much great information that we've just been able to soak up this first section. So we're going to move right into some breakout sessions.